So yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm very excited to talk about our new paper of the design of Fluidmeet, a video conferencing system for virtual breakout meetings on behalf of my co-authors, Erzhen and Sungku Ho. And so let me start with a brief introduction of myself. My name is Erzhen Hu, and I'm now a first-year PhD student at the University of Virginia. And before that, I received my bachelor's degree in sociology and applied psychology and a master's in statistics. So my current research is focused on HCI, especially the video-mediated communication and remote collaboration. And my advisor is Sungku Ho, who is also the co-author of this work. And in the next 30 minutes, let's dig more into more details of this Fluidmeet paper, and feel free to interrupt and ask questions whenever you have one. So in this paper, we specifically study breakout meetings. What are breakout meetings? Breakout meetings is a type of meetings where small conversation groups are formed and their members are quickly exchanged, and there could be some newcomers join. And I'm sure that some of you may attend or organize one of these meetings of some fashion in the past 2 years, whether you are organizing or attending some poster sessions at academic conferences or workshops or lectures that use those so-called breakout rooms. And many benefit of having those conversations is that it can enable a smaller group of people to have ad-hoc informal conversations, and you can also form some lightweight connections in smaller groups. So here's an overview of today's talk. I'm going to talk about, first of all, a review of the current video meeting systems that facilitate some small group conversations supported by not only some emerging commercial systems, but also research work that investigate those platforms. And also back to 1990s, there's computer-mediated or groupware system-oriented work that focused on awareness and social presence that is related to this topic. And Fluidmeet is also a video conferencing system that inspired by several socio-spatial theories. So I will talk briefly how these theories have been adopted by prior HCI research and what's new about our perspective. And then I will connect the design of Fluidmeet to these concepts and the findings from our user study and some design implications for future work. So let's switch back to this scene of breakout meetings in this physical space. There could be many types of conversations happening in these meetings. For example, in-group members may whisper to each other, and they may also overhear and follow other groups' conversation and choose to join one. For example, these persons may looking at one of the posters, but they are able to overhear the conversations that behind them. And this additional awareness can help them to decide whether to join this group or whether it is the right time to join the conversation. But what about virtual meetings? For virtual meetings, what we say would be broadcasted to the whole group, and therefore I cannot whisper with each other, and there are fewer informal conversations during these meetings. And if you think about this context with multiple conversations in this between group dimension, you cannot know the context of the conversation of other breakout rooms, and the transition and boundaries of these meetings are much more static. And for example, you can see here that before joining a breakout rooms, this person can only see the usernames for other rooms. And one solution could be using those proximity-based virtual meeting platforms that has less clear boundaries before joining to other conversation groups, such as GatherTown that we use today, and also Mozilla Hubs and Frame VR, that they really solve some accessibility problems in introducing those 3D environments, because you can either access it through your personal computer, which is more convenient, or you can use VR headset in a more immersive way. But there's still some issues of having some type of conversations in these type of systems. Let's take GatherTown as an example. Gather enable people to jump into groups when close to each other. However, it creates high friction with additional transition efforts for users. For example, these two users, they may want to have private conversations, but they will need to move far away from the current group to have it, or they need to find another private space. And there's another way that is relatively similar to Zoom checkbox that, but there's also an important aspect lacking here is the visual cue of these physical distances between sending message to person nearby, or sending it to broadcast it to everyone, or send a direct message, which is a private message. And another problem is that before joining a group, newcomers may feel hesitant to participate without any conversation context. So although Gather provide awareness in some sense, like you can show your intention to join by orientation or movement of your avatar, it still cannot provide enough level of awareness for the current conversation context. So we devised a table here to summarize or vary those virtual meeting systems that support two types of conversation boundaries. So the static boundary that have relatively static transitions between different rooms, that people need to travel between rooms with low visibility, like the name of users and the current active speakers or the location of that person in other rooms. And there's a system with less clear boundaries, such as Gather or Mozilla, that you can navigate around and be able to communicate across distances and maneuver in this virtual world. But you still need, although it provides this awareness of visualization of avatars, you still need to move aside to have private talk, and this transition and this control between different groups need more effort. So instead of these two type of conversation boundaries, the concept we want to present here with Fluidmeet is the flexible boundary, where conversations can either be fully open, that others can see, hear, and influence the conversation, or it can be something in the middle, which is semi-open, where others can either see some keywords extracted from the live conversation or see some audio levels, and fully closed, which means that no information about conversation is shared. So that's the concept that we try to present with the prototype of Fluidmeet. So there's also tools that incorporate both static and no boundaries. For example, like Mozilla Hubs, you can have breakout rooms that contain smaller group of people that, but those rooms are relatively isolated between themselves. And there's larger space that is used for social events or keynotes that is capable of containing maybe 50 to 100 participants. But there's pros and cons as studied by the work of Julie Williamson and her team, that for smaller groups, it facilitates more cohesive and focused group conversations. But the problem is that your personal space might be invaded, and there's a lack of social translucency, which means that you need to travel to other room in order to see the content. And for the larger rooms, it contains more people, and you can form some groups in the space, and the personal space is more flexible, which is the advantage, but it made some small group formation challenging. So these systems are emerging in recent years, although it had been studied for a long time previously, maybe for virtual environments. But going back to 1990s, there has also been a lot of practical or system-oriented research on computer-mediated communication that includes those video-based communication with awareness mechanisms being a central topic. So this awareness is understanding of the activities of others that provides the context for your own activity. That some of those research that to enhance the workspace awareness, they study different systems that we can use this typical space time matrix to classify it. For example, some of those systems are over time, which can be synchronous tools, such as audio or video conferencing or instant message. And it can be asynchronous tools that, such as emails or shared databases. And for the space dimension, it can be face-to-face for some public displays or tabletop. And it can also be distributed for like those chat systems or meeting systems. So the goal of those many of those research is to provide these casual communication opportunities in a semi-synchronous manner, where you can aware the presence of others, and that awareness can lead to more conversations. For example, today, if we are editing in the Google Doc and we can see that small icon of your collaborator being there, and having that information, you may start a conversation with them, or you may click on that person's icon and you can know that this person is currently working on some part of this document. And a lot of work here is to enable the collaboration across distant teams by supporting some snapshots of the offices, or like the montage that it supports the glances into other offices with a phase-in effect gradually. And it can not only be this presence of person, but also that you can aware of many digital things around the environment. Like, for example, this notification collage that it uses a map of the bulletin board that contains this collage of randomly positioned visual elements. And after becoming aware of this information, we sometimes act on it by moving it to other spaces, altering it, or respond to people that associate with it. And there also can be some sticky notes here that can be seen and overheard by others, so that gives some opportunities for other people to join the conversation. And moreover, many of those systems support a digital doorway between different rooms so that people can navigate between those rooms, so-called permeability, but you can not see any content. But some of those different states of doorways, like a partially open door, may indicate a willingness to accept interruptions, and this barred door that suggests that this room and the persons in it is inaccessible. And unlike this permeability doorway concept, our system, Fluidmeet, we want to support the notion of relatively semi-permeable rooms that construct an additional space between the breakout rooms so that people are able to see and overhear into these spaces before joining there. So this line of research is very related to our goal of enhanced awareness of not only the presence of others, but also the conversation context. Another goal is to support this transition to mediate some low friction transitions between different types of conversations. And also our goal of this project was not try to replicate the physical aspect of informal minglings, such as a fact of physical proximity, but our design instead focus on implementing the key features that support these properties of conversation dynamics. So let me explain how we designed this Fluidmeet system. We want to understand how people utilize the distances in conversations and how they grab information from conversations so that we, sorry? Okay. So, so that we review the theories of human-human interactions. And based on these theories, we constructed 3 design properties, which is interpersonal distances, cross-group distances, and privacy interaction flexibility. And let's talk about interpersonal distances first. In physical environment, people may construct different distances, so-called proxemic theory, which can be intimate distances that allow for touch or whispers, and personal distances that we naturally maintain with strangers, and social distances where we catch each other's gaze. So our system is inspired by how people communicate in the physical environment. And before moving to these Fluidmeet features, I will use proxemics as an example of different ways to use those socio-spatial theories in HCI research for both in-person or remote settings. So we already know that the theory of proxemics are about how people use space and how they enact those social relationships with different distances. And it has inspired some framework from Ubicom systems in which people will interact with multiple computing devices in different form factors, so that they start to focus on the detection of those social relationships between humans and their devices. And for example, the research on cross-device interactions may draw upon the proxemics theories that like you can share your screens to different devices, like from your mobile phone to your television and to the tablet. And so by detecting those patterns of like movement and distances and orientation of the person to a device, they can some sort of know like this person moving closer, for example, to a television, and they may have a intention to interact with it. So maybe they will show more visibility of the menus of the television to, so that's how they use proxemics for this field of view. And there's also research that use proxemics as a framework to understand social VR systems like Mozilla Hubs, because these systems sort of let people navigate across different distances, just like we have in the physical environment. But there could be some differences in how much these systems translate our understanding of physical spaces into virtual spaces. And there's also some findings from this year's CHI that there are some differences from of the translation of this distance from the person's perception, where they access the Mozilla Hub through the personal computer and compared to they access it in the VR headset. And also, those physical proxemics can affect how people perceive each other, right? And another line of research they focus on to create this virtual proximity in a video-mediated communication. And this proximity is not only about distance between different users, but also about how person perceive the size of others differently at different distances. And this, for example, this video showed image of me, but if I zoom in the camera and make myself larger, and it will result in some different effects. The first is that the person in the view would become larger, and also related to a subsequent decrease of the amount of background. So this can create an illusion that this person is closer to you. So also a way of how people utilize this proxemics in their research. So this is how previous work used this differently. And in our work, we suggest forming a nested conversation structure where users can have their private conversation within the group conversation to facilitate a one-to-one conversations. That is similar to like if you are in the conversation, you do not need to move to other spaces to whisper, which can be anticipated as these two users are closer to each other. That it is also this visibility and noticeability is also important here, because based on the fact that you can quickly grab that person's attention so that you can talk with them. So we want to make this channel visible so that users should be able to detect ongoing conversations and be preferably aware of their one-to-one or set conversations. Here's how we enable it. When the user initiates a private message to a member in the same group, the message and calls are visualized as a colored bubble called halos in the corner of the receiver's video stream. And this is really different in the video-mediated communication, especially in some sense that in the physical space, you cannot see yourself as a reflection in this video box. And in this case, this halo in the corner of your own video stream is really visible, and you are being some sort of preferably aware of these messages, and the short message on it can also be served as a communication channel. And this scene also shows that the user can flexibly transit from the personal to closer distances. For example, when the user gets a private call request, they can either reply to that message or they can select the camera button on Halo to start a private call. And in both users' view, there's some indicator of the yellow border and dimming effect that shows that they're in the private talk. And other users can see the frozen video of the two users in a private talk. Moreover, when two users are in a private talk, a user can use the switch handler to switch the mode back to the group conversation without stop the current private call. And this shows a fluid transition between the social distance and the personal or intimate distances. So now we've seen what's happening in the within group dimensions. And before joining the group, people may overhear some split words or find something of interest to them. How can we enable this between group dimensions? Here comes our second design property, which is cross-group distances, that in co-present activities, people often orient themselves in different spatial arrangements, so-called affirmations. So this affirmation is a concept that people will have a focused encounter, and it defines some concentric rings as the group's protected space. And there are different arrangements that can be categorized into either closed or open arrangements. And people tend to use open arrangement to send a message to others whether they are available to them joining or not, so that they can have a visual control of the environment and also show some certain level of readiness to collaborate with nearby others. However, the protected space of F formation does not consider groups' immediate environment. There's a C space that allows outsiders to some sort of get the context of the group and allows the group to show their readiness of conversation to the out group members. So similar to this use of C space in the real world, an outsider closer to that group will have more awareness of the group's discussion, and the group can decide how much information our group members can monitor or perceive from the group with 5-level conceptual distances that we designed on the room panels of Fluidmeet. So these 5 levels are on the room panels, and they're locked, atmosphere, word cloud, live stream, and public on the top of the Fluidmeet user interface. So let me dig into more details about this. So similar to the Zoom breakout room, our first distance level is locked, where users cannot see any content from the room panel. And then beyond that is the that the group can share the atmosphere, where the pitch and amplitude of the voice from all breakout room members will be visualized as these colored audio bars on other groups' interfaces, and different color represent different persons. And the word cloud distance also shows the top 10 frequency words from members of other breakout rooms. In physical space, whenever you move closer and actively follows the conversation at certain distance, he or she may overhear several split words from this conversation. And the live stream distance offers additional information and context about the conversation, that it contains some user's facial expressions, and it is similar to like you standing in the hallway and looking into a meeting through the glass window. And at the public distance, a hyperlink will be shared to other rooms, and they will enable our group members to influence the group conversation. And moreover, we enable a room controller to support the transition between these 5 distances, and the between group dimension can be minimized when the people or the user want to focus more on the group conversation. And we can enlarge it by scrolling up to see more details when they are interested in other groups' conversation. And the host of the room can change those cross-group distances by using this slider, and they can also change it when the room controller is minimized. And the out-group user can also request levels from the group. In this scene, the shared levels is word cloud, but the user can request live streaming to the classroom, to this room named classroom, from a menu on the room panel here. So this request will be shown as a red grid on the room controller that shows the level of the that the user is requesting. So it will show who is the user and where the user is from and which level the user is requesting. And with the group's approval, this user can now see the live stream from this classroom, the breakout room of classroom. And as I explained, our system allows people to utilize these interpersonal and cross-group distances. But in the real world, these changes and transitions are more dynamic and subtle, so it's not a static value because people's needs change by context, time, and many other factors. And this has been identified by Altman as privacy regulation theory. And in his study, he defined privacy as a boundary regulation process that people need to change it frequently as context changes. So here comes the third design property, which is the privacy interaction flexibility. For example, Fluidmeet features such as room controller mentioned before are designed to support efficient and dynamic control between privacy and group interaction. And also, all group members can request more levels by clicking on that request your interest on the room panels. That also shows that you can request more desired privacy levels from a group. And we conducted the user study with 16 participants comparing Zoom, Breakout Room, and Fluidmeet to determine whether Fluidmeet enhances the awareness and ease the transitions between conversation modes and to understand the user experience of using it. So here, because within a group, we have this halo widget that enables these bubbles around your video stream, and you can also perceive other users in a private talk as still images. And for the between group dimension, we enable those room panels that show different levels of openness or closeness to other conversations. And there's two effects of this awareness from both dimensions. So we want to investigate it separately and independently so that we separate the task into a two-part user study. And for the part one tasks, we specifically investigate this within group awareness that we compare Zoom text message with Halo channel of private talk. And the task is one lie and one choose, which is a typical ice breaking task that both of users came up with one statement, and one is lie, one is truth. And we let them to have a private conversation to decide who is the liar and think about the statement, and then they jump back to the group conversation and talk to the group. And others can ask questions about the statement for several rounds, and they discuss and decide which person is the liar, and then they take turns to be the presenter. And for study part two, because we want to examine the between group dimension so that we create 3 breakout rooms by default. And the scenario mimic an online fun fair or a camp expo where there's 3 breakout rooms doing some different tasks. For example, the survival games that participants need to rank a list of survival items when they were lost at the sea or on the moon. And there's this fortunately and unfortunately task in another breakout room, which is a turn-taking game that a group of participants need to play telling a story game that each sentence starts from either fortunately or unfortunately and constantly alternating. And there also be a chat room for users to chat with the experimenter that we have some pre-prepared conversation topics for them. And we also implemented a launch for the users so that after the first round of these tasks, they can either go to other rooms or they can create a new room and to create their own room and own games so that we can motivate their needs to travel between different rooms after the first round and investigate this transition between different groups. And for each condition of study part 1 and part 2, we measure the survey items on social presence and their conversation experience to understand the effects of this in-group and between-group awareness. And we also measure some usability in terms of the mental efforts and level of focus to understand if the flexibility eases the transition with or without some extra efforts. So at the end of the study, there's a final survey collecting users' preference and their subjective feedback. And there's also an interview for participants who are willing to attend. So here comes to the findings that first part finding is about the design of halo and cross group distances, that participants really perceive this halo widget to be really useful, especially for this peripheral location. It's easier to notice than the baseline. And they also like the look and how accessible it is. And this location also made it easier for them to distinguish the private message from group message. As part of some of the participants mentioned that they may accidentally reply their classroom's private message to the public chat in Zoom. And also for design of the 5 cross-group distances, overall, participants prefer the distances such as a word cloud or live stream that reveal more information. And some of them may prefer the easier to digest information due to the attention allocation concerns. Like some of them mentioned that they prefer word cloud to live streaming because it offered a quick overview of the topic. And in some contexts, they may have no time to check the live stream. And one participant also mentioned that she preferred atmosphere over the word cloud because she just wants to see the color of the audio bars, which is easier to digest than the words. So they also point out that the lower level distances may sometimes be overlooked in the presence of higher level information. For example, if you have the live stream video occurred, sometimes they did not notice the audio bars because they rely heavily on the more presence information. And they also appreciate the convenience and availability of the private course that might help them learn more about and building some connections. Especially, they love the transition from the text message in the Halo to the private call in the private channels. And in some sense, they can first being aware of this conversation, these short conversation through the Halo, and then this enhanced awareness can be further and leads to some longer conversations through the private calls. And participants also perceived a sense of connectivity and presence of what was going on, that they feel this private course seems to have some sort of inclusion, that it is like you are in the classroom and you're sitting at your table and you can see others whispering and you're like directly involved. This is like reading the room. And they also have some concerns about side conversations, especially when typing the text message, that others may see your facial expressions and they may misunderstood that you are being multitasking some meeting unrelated tasks. But having a private core with still image seems to indicate that their attention is still in the meeting. And the room panels are not very distracted from perspective of the participants because they can also see it in the minimized way. And most of them would like to learn more about other people from other breakout room in Fluidmeet with the presence of the room panels. And they also like that they can see the information without traveling there. And some of them describe their experience of jumping between different breakout rooms during a school event that caused some extensive manual and mental effort because they do not know what's happening there and they feel disconnected, and they also hesitated to join. And for the feedback for the room controller, many of the participants, they appreciate being able to have a control over the number of people in their session, because this happens many times when you can join many conversations freely, and there's many users in some of those breakout rooms, and when they join there, they don't know how to start. And if they can some sort of control the number of people, at some sense, like in this context, there's more people coming, they can make their visibility level of that room panel lower, then it perceived as a good feature for them. And also they think that the room controller may avoid unanticipated jumpings from latecomers, which often happens in the virtual meetings. That one participant mentioned that there was a silence in their breakout room in Zoom, and it is a lecture, and there's a professor jumping in, and they feel a little bit awkward at that moment. And in addition, two participants were concerned about the delay of their request being granted by other groups during the experiment. So what I just talked about is the findings of the interviews as well as the comments in the survey, and we've concluded some implications and discussion for designers and meeting organizers for future work. And with Fluidmeet, it seems that this enhanced presence of others' activities, such as the still image or the text indicator, offers some activity transparency and provides a sense of connectivity. And Halo itself, that participants really like it because it is not only awareness, enhanced awareness, but also it is a way that you can communicate with each other, that they find it's really good. So designers and developers in the future may consider that implementing this private channel to alleviate the lack of one-to-one conversations by enhancing the private channel's noticeability. And another part is that we may consider how it could afford a transition from the awareness to the foreground interaction and from their private conversation to the group conversations. And for the between group visibility part, the presence of room panels really support a transition between users' focused and unfocused interactions. However, there's also some concerns that the richness of this constantly changing information and the nested cross-group distances on room panels was a mixed blessing, because if there's richer information like live streaming, it may overshadow the lower level distances like atmosphere, as participants mentioned. And this could also because that the design sensitivity of our tool is mainly exert more on their visual demand, but not other channels like hear, smell, and touch that you may perceive in the physical environment. And for design implication, we suggest that integrating such a feature in a more scalable virtual breakout meeting system, such as virtual conferences, may think about or take the form of recommending a user's information or topic of interest by analyzing some history of the breakout rooms that the person already browsed, requested, or joined. Another way could be that we could enable a manual filter of the current breakout conversations in the lounge or in the breakout rooms based on the topic of the moment. And there's also problem from the users about the time delay of granting the outgroup members' requests. And in that case, outgroup members may feel isolated from the group boundary, and their group-to-group transitions may be restrained. And for those concerns, we think it's mainly maybe a problem that is balanced between the group ownership and their tendency to transition between different breakout rooms. So for meetings with really frequent transitions, we suggest maybe provide a level of privacy, but still enable the enter room button at other visibility levels, that we can anticipate users to rely on a social protocol to enter the room boundary, but also support some awareness for before the person joins. So in summary, for the work of Fluidmeet, instead of imitating the physical spatial relationships, we use the conceptual distances in the human-human interaction to optimize the design and enhance awareness with less friction, so that the conversations can be mediated as closer and farther from other conversations. So yeah, with that, I will close the presentation. And thank you so much for having me again.